Let's take the unique local address. If we use a /64 as the subnet mask or network portion of our 128-bit IP version 6 address, that still leaves the prefix. And we know that the prefix determines the network address or subnet. That still leaves us with a 64-bit interface ID to uniquely identify the host. There are several ways that this can be done. Stateful auto configuration. An IP version 6 address can be manually assigned by an administrator, or we can configure DHCP version 6 to allocate addresses dynamically. This might be a preferred method in some organizations because, for reasons which we're going to cover next, you might want to exclude the MAC address as part of the IP version 6 address. The EUI64 addresses. IP version 6 can generate its own interface ID by utilizing the interface MAC address. However, as a MAC address is 48 bits long and the interface ID is 64 bits long, it needs a bit of help. So we take the interface MAC address, which is shown on the screen, and we insert FF:/FE directly in the middle, giving us the following address. We also make sure that we set the universal local bit to a value of 1 in the first octet, which sounds confusing, but it is relatively easy. The universal local bit will invert the next to lowest significant bit. So if it's a 0, we set it to a 1, and if it's already a 1, then we set it to a 0. In our case, it's already a 1, so if we set it to a 0, we get the following IP version 6 address. Stateless auto configuration allows IP version 6 nodes to automatically assign an IP version 6 address to a neighbor, effectively eliminating the need for static address assignment and DHCP. Stateless auto configuration uses a few different parts to get going. The EUI address. We've discussed how the 64-bit EUI can be auto-generated utilizing the MAC address. An IP version 6 router will send an RA, which is a router advertisement message, to hosts periodically to provide the IP version 6 prefix and whether to perform IP version 6 auto configuration, along with some additional information. Router solicitation messages are sent by hosts to discover the presence of routers on the link. When an IP version 6 router receives an RS request from a host, it responds by transmitting a router advertisement message back to the host, announcing its existence and providing the host with the information it needs to perform auto configuration tasks. Prefix list. This table contains IP version 6 prefixes which the host can use to perform address auto configuration. Guys, before we begin, I'd just like to let you know I'm a real network engineer in real life. I just do this training as a bit of a side hustle. And I was sent into London yesterday to do some troubleshooting on a network, and there was pollen everywhere, and I suffered from some chronic hay fever. So I'm going to have to do some clever editing to get rid of all my coughs and splutters. And this is why my voice sounds a bit deep and raspy today, a bit sexy. But let's continue. This is the topology we're going to be using for the IP version 6 lab. I have 3 routers. Now, the reason that I'm using routers rather than hosts is only because I'm still using my wife's laptop, and I would have to install VNC to open up the Linux or Windows host. And this topology would still work if you wanted to use a Linux host, but I'll be using some Cisco routers. They're connected to a switch, and then they have the Juniper IP version 6 router on the other end. So let's pretend that the Cisco routers are actually Cisco hosts. That's the topology that we're going to be using. And I currently have the Juniper IP version 6 router open. So let's begin. And all I've done is actually just literally opened it and put on the root authentication and password, no IP addressing or anything like that. So let's just clear the screen and let's have a look at our interface. Now we know that we're connecting on interface GE000. Let's have a look at that. Show interface GE000.0. And there's no configuration. So let's do our first configuration. We're going to be covering 3 of the 4 styles of doing IP version 6 addressing today. So we'll be covering the manual configuration, we'll be covering the EUI, and then we'll be doing the stateless auto configuration. The only one that I won't be covering is the DHCP version 6. Alright, so we're going to start off with the manual configuration. And for IP version 6, we're going to have to use the family address of INET 6. Set address. Let's say we wanted to address a global address of 2000.1, and we could do the address this way: 000 with 8 octets, 000, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and make it 001/64. We could do it like this, and that is a perfectly valid IP version 6 address. But because we know that we could compress leading zeros and then have any consecutive zeros just replaced with a colon, the whole of that long address there can actually just be written like this. And that's exactly the same address written in the compressed format. So that's the first one, just a manual IP address configuration, IP version 6 address configuration. This is the first one. So that's your manual IP address, a very quick one. The next one that we could look at is the EUI address. Now we could use the same interfaces, and what I might do, I might actually put the EUI in conjunction with the stateless auto configuration. I'm going to call that Slack. It's Slack, but I'm going to call it Slack. And one of the components of Slack is that it uses EUI. So let's just go ahead and do the Slack configuration now. So if I'm under the same interface as well, if I say set address, now we're going to make our prefix as 2345. Let's just say ABCD, and that's also going to be : 1 on a /64 for this interface. Now this interface is connected to a switch, so this will be the prefix. And let's get out of this. And what else is next? I need to say set protocol. This is just now we're setting out our router advertisement. The prefix that it's going to advertise should be 2345. It may actually advertise the 2001 as well, but I will specify that it can only use the 2345. So set protocols router advertisement coming out of interface GE000, and this is the prefix that we're going to be using, which is 2345 : ABCD : on a /64. I think that's all I need. Let me commit that. Now what will happen is that the IP version 6 router is going to send out a router advertisement. It's going to keep sending these out. Now when I do the auto configuration on the Cisco routers, they will send a router solicitation message to discover the router and see what prefixes they should be using. So as far as Juniper, that is completed. Now let me jump onto one of the Cisco routers, or all of the Cisco routers actually. And what we need to do on the Cisco routers for them to get an IP address on all of them, and I could probably put this into a notepad and just copy and paste. If I just said conf t on all of them, and then they all have the same interface, so it should be interface G00, IP version 6 enable. Oh, after the conf t I might have to say IP version 6 unicast routing. And then last part I should say is IP version 6, what is it, address? Maybe it says auto config or something like this. And no shut the interface. I think that is it. If I copy and paste that into all of the Cisco routers, then they should all get an IP address. So let me just Control C on that, or Command C on this. I'm hoping that actually copied. Now let me show you that first before I paste those in, that there's no IP version 6 configuration on these interfaces. Show IP version 6 interface brief. We've got nothing and the interfaces are closed down. So let me just copy and paste this. That's the first one. This is the second one. And this is the third one. Do show IP version 6 interface brief. And we can see that it's being given a link local address and also our prefix, which it starts with the 2345 ABCD, and then we're using the EUI address of 5274 FFFE01. Now that's being put in the middle of a MAC address, so I presume that this MAC address has like 0000 somewhere. That's why it's shortened it. Let's have a look at the second one. Do show IP version 6 interface brief. And again, this is shortened. So let's have a look at the actual MAC address of that interface. Do show interface G0/0. I'm expecting lots of zeros. Yes, so here we go. So our MAC address is 507400. Then the FFE has been stuck in the middle, and then it's got 02, and these have just been omitted because they're consecutive zeros. And what's happened is taken the second most consecutive bit. So if I write this into a notepad, again, where's the trusty notepad? If we open up this one. So what's happened, when you see 50, this is not 50. In hex, what this is it's set up into 4 nibbles. So what we've got is, it will say 8, 4, 2, and 1. And then we'll also have 8, 4, 2, and 1. So to get the 5, it will say 0, 1, 0, 1. And to get the 0, it will just be 0, 0, 0, 0, 4 zeros, yeah? And it says the second most significant bit, so it's this one we're flipping. At the moment it says it's a 2, we would make that a 1. And what would happen here is the 5 would stay the same because the 5 is this piece. But this 0 here would now change to a 2. And these are the first 2 bits of our MAC address. So if we go back and look on our MAC address, which was shown here, we see 5074. But if we look in the IP address which has been assigned to this interface, do show IP version 6 brief. Interface brief. We can see that it's using the MAC address, but it's inverted a bit, so it becomes 5274 instead of 5074. Now, to confirm the IP addresses and the prefixes on the actual Juniper, because this is a Juniper course, not a Cisco course, let me close these down. And I like that blue color, it's nice and funky. If we first say show IP version 6 neighbors, oh, maybe not. Run show IP version 6 neighbors. We can see that we have 3 neighbors and these are their IP addresses. So our 3 neighbors are on a link local address of FE80 5274, and this is the EUI address. And it also shows their MAC addresses. So from here we could determine how it's changed the MAC address into the EUI address. It also says that we're connected to routers. If you were connected to a Linux host, I would expect this to say no. and it shows you which interface we're actually connected to as well. And the other command I would run is run show IP version 6. Is it router advertisement? Yeah. And we could also see a lot of good information here. You see the link local address of the neighbor. You see how long or how many router advertisements have been sent, how many router solicitations have been received. Some very, very good information here. But that's about it for this part of the course. So we've done the manual configuration. We saw how EUI works, and we also configured stateless auto configuration on the Juniper device. Let's move on to the next one.